The story begins in a dimly lit study, the kind of room where time seems to slow down. Papers are spread across a wooden desk, their edges curled and yellowed by tobacco smoke. A man in his 40s sits hunched over, his sleeves rolled up, his fingers tapping a pencil against a page covered in equations, arrows, and strange diagrams of memory and machines. Outside, the world is rebuilding itself from the ashes of war. Inside, he's trying to imagine the future, a future where human knowledge itself could be connected, alive, and shared by everyone. His name is Vannevar Bush, and in 1946, he wrote something that should have changed the world. At that time, the world didn't know how to dream like that. The Second World War had just ended. Nations were haunted by destruction, not innovation. The word computer didn't yet mean what it does now. It described people, mostly women, who calculated numbers by hand. Machines were huge, clunky, and loud, filling entire rooms and barely able to multiply faster than a clever mathematician. Yet Bush believed something much deeper was possible, that the human mind could be extended by machines, that memory itself could one day live beyond paper. Bush wasn't a recluse. He had already built his name as a respected engineer, a quiet visionary who had helped guide American science during the war. As director of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, he had overseen projects that changed history: radar, code breaking, even the Manhattan Project. But the war left him restless. All that brilliance had been used to destroy. Now he wanted to build. He began to imagine something called the Memex, short for memory extender. It wasn't a computer as we know it today. It was a desk, a large, beautiful piece of furniture fitted with screens, levers, and reels of microfilm. Yet, in that mechanical vision, he described something eerily familiar, a machine that could link pieces of information together, where one idea could lead directly to another through associative trails. He wrote, "A person can store all his books, records, and communications, and with this device, consult them with exceeding speed and flexibility." That sentence would later echo through generations of thinkers, because what Bush described was not just a filing system, it was hyperlinking, decades before the word existed. He saw, with almost supernatural clarity, what the internet would become. The essay where Bush revealed his idea was published in the Atlantic Monthly in July 1945, under the title, "As We May Think." The timing was striking, just weeks before the end of World War II. Millions were reading about victory, surrender, and atomic bombs. Yet, hidden between those headlines was an idea that quietly pointed toward a second kind of revolution, not of weapons, but of knowledge. Bush's words were calm and deliberate. He wasn't selling science fiction. He was predicting the next logical step in humanity's evolution of thought. He saw that as knowledge expanded, humans were drowning in information. Libraries overflowed, scientific papers multiplied, and no one could keep up. "The investigator," he wrote, "is staggered by the findings and conclusions of thousands of other workers." What he proposed was a remedy, a way to make knowledge accessible, personal, and alive. Imagine it. A desk that stored everything you knew, your books, photos, letters, and notes, all connected by association. Tap one lever and a page of an old study appears. Tap another and the next connected idea flashes up, linked by your own curiosity. You could trace the path of your thinking, share it, or build on someone else's trail. The Memex would make the human mind external, its patterns visible and shareable. In 1946, that sounded like magic. But it wasn't fantasy. It was foresight. Bush believed technology was not an end in itself. It was a means for humanity to think together. He saw machines not as replacements for humans, but as amplifiers of imagination. But the world didn't listen. The war's momentum had pushed science toward rockets, weapons, and control. Governments wanted power, not connectivity. Industry wanted profit, not philosophy. The Memex remained a thought experiment, elegant, brilliant, and ignored. Still, Bush's essay found quiet readers, a new generation of scientists who saw more than the world around them. Among them was a young radar technician named Douglas Engelbart. who would later invent the computer mouse and dream of a global information network. When Engelbart read Bush's words, he said it felt like a light going on in his head. Another was Ted Nelson, who coined the word hypertext and envisioned computers as tools of freedom. And beyond them, the pioneers of the internet itself, people who had grown up in a world Bush could only imagine, all built on the roots he planted. The irony was that Bush himself never saw it happen. Through the 1950s and 60s, he continued his academic work, advising, lecturing, and warning about the dangers of bureaucracy in science. But as computing evolved, his name faded into the background. The world credited others, Engelbart, Licklider, Berners-Lee, the builders of the networked age. Bush became a footnote, a man who had glimpsed the future before it was even possible to construct it. Yet, his vision was different from the internet we know today. He imagined something deeply human. The Memex was personal, built for reflection, not consumption. There were no advertisements, no algorithms, no endless feeds. It was a place where memory could grow organically, where human curiosity, not profit, guided the path of discovery. In that sense, Bush predicted not just technology, but the philosophy behind it, that knowledge must remain free, interconnected, and alive. In his later years, Bush watched the rise of the first mainframe computers with cautious optimism. He admired their power, but feared their centralization. He believed the true potential of technology lay in decentralization, giving individuals the tools to think independently. That idea would later become the core of the internet's early spirit, a web of equals, not a hierarchy. There's a haunting detail that few remember. In his essay, Bush described the Memex not just as a tool for knowledge, but as a bridge between generations. He imagined a scientist tracing the intellectual path of those before him, following trails of thought that could outlive their creators. Wholly new forms of encyclopedias will appear, he wrote, ready-made with a mesh of associative trails running through them. In a sense, he dreamed of Wikipedia, decades before it existed. He understood something profound. Human memory is fragile, but connection gives it permanence. In 1974, Vannevar Bush died quietly at the age of 84. There were no grand tributes, no headlines. His legacy had been buried under newer inventions, satellites, mainframes, and microchips. Yet, somewhere in the background of every hyperlink, every shared document, every search query, his shadow lingers. The web, as we know it, was built on the architecture of his imagination. If you look at early sketches of the Memex, they seem almost quaint, mechanical levers, lenses, and film. But beyond the machinery lies something timeless, the belief that knowledge should never belong to one person or one institution. It should flow, connect, evolve. That belief became the moral backbone of the digital world, before it was corrupted by noise and speed. Today, we live in the realization of his dream, though distorted. We have the infinite library he imagined, but we rarely use it to think deeply. Our associative trails are guided not by curiosity, but by algorithms. Yet Bush's vision remains a reminder that technology was meant to extend us, not consume us. The Memex wasn't about escaping reality, it was about seeing it more clearly. Sometimes the most powerful ideas don't come from revolutionaries or prophets, but from quiet thinkers sitting alone in a room, asking what could make life more meaningful. Bush was one of them. He didn't chase fame, he chased clarity, a world where thought could flow as freely as conversation. He once said, "Science has promised us truth. It has never promised us either peace or happiness, but in his own way, he tried to give humanity both through understanding." The story of Vannevar Bush is not one of triumph or tragedy, but of foresight. He saw what we might become, and in doing so, he showed that imagination can be just as powerful as invention. His Memex never existed, yet it lives on in every connected mind, in every digital trail that links one human thought to another. If you could sit across from him today, in that smoke-filled study, You might see a man watching the modern world with both wonder and sorrow. He would marvel at what we built and mourn what we lost. But above all, he would understand. He always did. Because long before anyone had heard of the internet, one forgotten genius had already seen it, in the quiet turning of a reel, in the flicker of an idea, in the unbroken thread that connects all human memory. And maybe that was the point all along.